Hey guys, tonight we tilt our gaze toward the Andes, that rugged backbone of South America, where the night air is so thin you can hear your own breath rattling in your chest. You lift your eyes and there it is, 3i divided by Atlas, the interstellar interloper sweeping across the black canvas. You probably won't survive this trip if you insist on climbing a mountain barefoot, but at least you'll see a light show you'll never forget. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love it if you posted your location and local time down below. Who knows? Maybe someone across the world is watching under the same constellation as you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself wrapped in a cloak of chill air, the Milky Way arcing overhead like spilled flour on velvet. Every star feels sharper here, closer to your skin, as though you could reach up and pluck one out like a grape from a vine. And right there, a streak, icy green, faint, almost shy, marks the traveler. 3i divided by Atlas. It does not belong to our Sunday. It does not belong to our system. It is a visitor, an alien, carving a path we will never see repeated in our lifetimes. People whisper about maps in the sky, and here, standing on these ancient plateaus, you can almost believe it. Indigenous elders once said the heavens mirrored the land. Historians still argue whether this was literal mountains mirrored as constellations or metaphorical, a way to remind humans they were stitched into the same cosmic quilt. Either way, as you squint at the greenish glow, you sense a geometry, as though the comet is tracing a line across the firmament, one that might connect deserts, rivers, and sacred sites into a secret cartography. A mainstream fact sits heavy in your mind. The first interstellar object we knew was Oumuamua in 2017, a cigar-shaped mystery that bolted through our solar system. 3i divided by Atlas followed, discovered in 2019, the third confirmed wanderer. Unlike Oumuamua, though, Atlas brought drama. It began to fragment, splitting like a cold sugar cube dropped in hot coffee. Telescopes caught the pieces tumbling, glowing faintly, fading but still burning themselves into astronomical records. But here's the quirky tidbit. Local shepherds in the Andes tell of firestones that cross the sky every few generations. Stones that mark paths only llamas and stars can see. Some say the glowing tails point to buried springs in the desert. Is it coincidence, or did ancient eyes long ago link celestial streaks to survival maps on Earth? You don't answer, you just keep trudging the thin air, grinning at the notion that cosmic navigation might involve both quasars and thirsty alpacas. The sky pulses with layers, constellations drawn by Greeks, dark cloud animals imagined by the Quechua, and now, the streak of a stranger from the galactic suburbs. Somewhere in your chest you feel the tension of mystery. Is it just ice and dust disintegrating? Or is it a message etched in space, a path pointing towards something only humans too stubborn to sleep at 3a will ever notice? You tilt your head, and the comet seems to cross above the dark wedge of the Nazca Plateau. Those enormous geoglyphs, the monkey, the hummingbird, the spider, stretch across the sand, so large you can only see them from above. Historians still argue whether they were maps, calendars, or messages for sky beings. Tonight, as 3i divided by Atlas glides overhead, you can't help imagining the desert figures and the comet's trail as one connected scroll, drawn not on paper but on the earth and heavens themselves. Your breath fogs the air, and you imagine tracing that line with your fingertip, connecting dots no one else sees. Somewhere in the dark, an owl calls. Somewhere in orbit, satellites hum. And above it all, an interstellar fragment fades toward oblivion, still teaching you how to read the night. You chuckle quietly. If only your GPS app had a cosmic map layer. Imagine, instead of traffic alerts, it shows glowing alien objects darting over mountain ranges. Turn left at the shattered comet, then proceed 200 kilometers. Absurd, yes, but in this cold starlight, not entirely impossible. And so you stand, still and silent, watching the faint line dissolve, feeling the Andes beneath your boots and the infinite sky pressing on your eyelids. Tonight, you carry the secret map in your memory, though you're not sure whether it was written in comet dust or in your own drowsy imagination. You're still standing there in the thin mountain air, and the night refuses to let go. The cold keeps sneaking under your jacket, but you can't look away from that faint smear of green tracing its ghost across the sky. To follow it, you let your imagination drift south, to a sleepy valley in northern Chile called Rio Hurtado. The year is 2019, the month December, and down in that narrow valley, the Atlas Survey telescope was busy keeping its round eyes open. You're invited to relive the night when Atlas spotted its namesake traveler. 3I divided by Atlas, an object flying so fast that astronomers blinked twice before daring to call it interstellar. The telescope wasn't even looking for cosmic visitors. It was built to guard Earth against neighborhood troublemakers, asteroids that could do to us what a cosmic bowling ball once did to the dinosaurs. Mainstream history tells you ATLAS stands for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, a Hawaiian network designed to yell, "Duck," if anything big heads our way. Yet in this case, the Chilean partner telescope stumbled into a prize no warning siren could predict, a shard from the void between stars. The quirky part? Local rumor has it the telescope's power sometimes flickers because of goats chewing the cables that run near the observatory grounds. Imagine the irony, ancient goats threatening the modern eyes we use to spy on billion-year-old travelers. You chuckle, because you can almost hear a cosmic narrator sigh. Humanity, ambitious enough to track alien comets, careless enough to lose to livestock. Still, on that December night, the data came clean. Astronomers tracked the object's hyperbolic orbit. That's a fancy way of saying it wasn't bound to the sun, not trapped in our solar family, not even a cousin passing by. Instead, it tore through our backyard on a one-time visit. Its trajectory suggested it came from the general direction of the constellation Sagittarius. Historians still argue whether it really hailed from there, or whether that's just a trick of perspective, since deep space plays cruel games with line of sight. Picture yourself inside the control room, the red glow of monitors staining your hands. Coffee cups pile up like archaeological layers on the desk. Someone points at the numbers scrolling across the screen. You lean closer, heartbeat loud in your ears. The numbers insist. This object has been traveling for millions of years, maybe longer, and the sun was never on its itinerary. It just wandered into our neighborhood by accident. You wonder how many other alien objects have passed unseen in centuries when humanity was too busy squabbling over borders to notice streaks of light overhead. Now your senses pull upward again. You imagine the comet's nucleus icy, fragile, just a few hundred meters across, breaking apart as sunlight gnawed at its surface. By the time most telescopes locked onto it, fragments were already peeling away. That breakup gave the object its ghostly glow, as though it were erasing itself even as you tried to learn its name. And here's the kicker. Its fragmentation meant astronomers had less data to study. The cosmic tourist shredded its passport before you could even stamp it. There's a faint echo in your mind of another mainstream fact. In astronomy, interstellar objects are named in sequence. Oumuamua was the first one, I, Borisov the second, 2I, and now Atlas, the third, 3I. That I doesn't stand for important, though it could. It means interstellar. It's a label that says, this one doesn't belong here. And don't you just feel the poetry of that, to be recognized by your refusal to stay bound? Meanwhile, the valley below Rio Hurtado is quiet. You hear wind hissing through dry scrub. You picture astronomers stepping out to stretch their legs, looking up with tired eyes, maybe whispering about cosmic maps, maybe not. But your imagination can't resist. What if the streak across the sky was mistaken for a pointer? A line guiding the gaze towards some deeper mystery. Historians still argue whether early Andean skywatchers recorded comets at all, because fragile records have been lost or burned. Spanish chroniclers wrote of hairy stars terrifying Inca priests, omens of war or plague. You can't prove they ever saw something like 3I divided by Atlas, but you can picture them huddled in mountaintop temples, torches sputtering, pointing at a sudden smear of light, debating whether it was a god's finger writing across the sky. Back in 2019, though, the debate was colder, cleaner, more mathematical. Was this object related to Borisov, the comet discovered earlier that year? Probably not. Different paths, different speeds. Was it just an unlucky snowball tossed out of some distant star system? Probably yes. But probabilities are not certainties, and astronomers love uncertainties almost as much as goats love chewing wires. You grin, because in this sleepy valley, science and superstition overlap like two constellations drawn on the same paper. You imagine the astronomers calling out coordinates, while outside, villagers might glance up and mutter old sayings about firestones. Two languages for the same streak of light, both convinced their version is the truth. The comet keeps sliding across your inner vision, heading out of the solar system at 30 kilometers per second. You squint, trying to read meaning in its trail, as though it were sketching some enormous galactic doodle. Was it random dust? Or was it a line in a hidden map that only the brave, the sleepless, and the slightly sarcastic would ever notice? You stretch your legs, the thin air biting. A stray dog barks far down the valley, and high above it all, 3I divided by Atlas burns away, leaving you with numbers, stories, and the sense that the sky itself has been scribbled on. You keep your gaze steady on that fading streak, and suddenly the desert horizon pulls you in like a mirage. The Andes give way to a wide, pale plateau, a place where sand seems older than time itself. You're standing above the Nazca lines, great geoglyphs carved into the earth so large they only make sense from the air. The monkey curls its spiral tail, the hummingbird stretches forever, the spider tiptoes delicately across the plain. They feel like part of the same riddle, the comet whispered to you. Is there a hidden map, binding earth and sky? The mainstream fact here is that the Nazca culture flourished between 200 BCE and 600 CE, long before telescopes, long before the word interstellar meant anything to humans. They carved hundreds of lines and shapes into the desert crust, etching away darker stones to reveal pale soil beneath. These massive works endured because rain almost never touches this plateau. Historians still argue whether the lines were ceremonial paths, astronomical calendars, or prayers etched toward the heavens. And tonight, as 3I divided by Atlas arcs faintly above, you notice how certain lines seem to point toward stars rising in the east or setting in the west. Astronomers tested this idea back in the 20th century, measuring orientations, charting alignments. Some found patterns, others dismissed them as coincidence. That's how science works, a cycle of proposal, refutation, and the occasional grumpy conference coffee break. The quirky tidbit. Local guides sometimes tell tourists that the hummingbird shape points toward the summer solstice sunrise. Whether that's true, or an inventive way to spice up a dusty hike, you can't quite tell. But the image lingers. What if the Nazca were mapping seasonal markers the same way astronomers map comet orbits, both searching for predictable rhythms in a chaotic sky? You close your eyes and imagine standing here centuries ago. No roads, no cars, no buzzing drones overhead, just a handful of builders scratching lines into the desert, trusting that gods or maybe alien visitors would notice. You smile, because the sarcasm creeps in. If you're going to send a message to space, maybe don't use something only visible from 10,000 feet up when you don't yet have hot air balloon. But maybe, just maybe, they weren't trying to send messages at all. Maybe they were inscribing memory. The comet's faint trail seems to connect with these lines, like chalk scrawled on both sky and sand. And suddenly you remember the Atacama Desert further north, where enormous geoglyphs, giant llamas, foxes, hunters march across hillsides. Some are travel markers, others likely ritual signposts. And once again, historians still argue whether they were meant for gods in the sky or caravans trudging across Earth. The truth might be both. After all, the line between sacred map and practical road sign is thinner than your blanket in this cold desert night. Now, imagine yourself walking the Nazca lines at dusk. The desert radiates stored heat. The horizon blurs in the fading sunday. You trace one line with your feet, its path arrowing into the distance. Somewhere overhead, 3I divided by Atlas drifts silently, as if retracing a pattern laid down by human hands 2,000 years ago. You almost expect the comet to pause, like a cursor hovering before clicking confirm on some cosmic diagram. Your mind drifts further. Could these lines, vast and straight, be seen as humanity's first attempts at a cosmic map? They don't chart planets or comets, but they do chart relationships, between land and sky, between ritual and survival. And if you tilt your imagination just right, you can see the whole desert as a mirror of the heavens, a notebook page where ancient South Americans tried to keep up with the universe's scribbles. Another tidbit slips in. Archaeologists found tiny wooden stakes at line intersections, suggesting surveyors planned these works with real engineering skill. That means the Nazca weren't aimlessly doodling, they had methods. And if they had methods, maybe the sky really was their template. You chuckle again, because in our modern world, you'd use Google Earth to sketch something this big. They used ropes, stakes, and a lot of patience. Imagine being the poor intern. Okay, Let's call him a junior apprentice told to haul stones out of the way for miles just so the hummingbird's beak points vaguely east. You can practically hear his sigh echo across centuries. Why couldn't we just invent pen and paper already? The night grows colder, and the desert whispers back silence. You run your hand across the hard ground, feeling tiny pebbles crunch under your palm. Each stone is part of a design so massive that only the gods or interstellar visitors could see it clearly. And isn't that the same frustration astronomers felt when 3I divided by Atlas appeared, only to fragment and vanish before they could get a good look? Both humans and comets seem fond of keeping secrets just out of reach. The comet, still faint above the horizon, feels like the latest addition to this ancient gallery of lines. It doesn't carve into sand, but into your memory. You sense the possibility of a cosmic cartography stretching across millennia. Nazca lines on the ground, comet trails in the sky, satellites now etching digital maps of both. And through it all, you stand bewildered, amused, and just a little sleepy, wondering whether the hidden map is real or just a trick of your own stargazing mind. The desert fades into shadow, and above you the Milky Way spills brighter and thicker than any city dweller could imagine. It doesn't look like a band of light. It looks like a river, but if you stare long enough, you notice gaps, great patches where no stars seem to shine. Those aren't empty. They're dust lanes, clouds of gas so dense they hide the starlight behind them. And here in South America, high in the Andes, people once looked at those dark shapes and didn't see nothingness, they saw animals. The mainstream fact is this. The Inca and other Andean cultures developed what we now call dark constellation astronomy. Instead of connecting dots of bright stars like Greeks and Romans did, they traced patterns in the shadows. The Great Llama, for instance, stretches through the dark rift near the Southern Cross. A fox crouches in another patch. A snake winds further along the Milky Way's spine. These shapes were alive in the night sky, woven into myth and agriculture alike. Farmers watched for when the llama rose, timing their herding seasons. Historians still argue whether these patterns were primarily ritual guides or practical calendars, but either way, they tethered human life directly to the hidden map above. Now, imagine yourself lying back on a cold stone, your spine pressed against rock still warm from the Sunday. You peer upward, and the Milky Way seems to breathe. The dark llama exhales, the fox twitches its ears, and the snake slithers slowly as the sky rotates. And just beyond that shadow river, a new streak appears, 3I divided by Atlas again, drifting through the storybook of the heavens. Suddenly, the old and the alien blur together. A visitor from another star crossing paths with constellations that only exist if you read darkness like ink. Here's the quirky tidbit. Modern planetarium shows in Cusco sometimes project these dark constellations alongside the European ones. Tourists ooh and ah, but you can't help smirking because in some versions, the toad dark constellation is said to bring rain, and yet most visitors never even notice the amphibian shape. It's like the sky is quietly playing Where's Waldo with celestial frogs, while everyone's staring at Orion's belt. You let your mind wander back centuries, to Andean priests called amortas, standing on mountain terraces. They teach apprentices how to see not just stars but shadows. You can almost hear the instructions. Don't look at the light, look at the darkness between. It feels like advice for life itself, doesn't it? Find meaning not in the obvious but in the overlooked. You smile, because even as an insomniac stargazer in the 21st century, you know that wisdom still stings true. And tonight, the comet feels like another dark constellation in motion, its fragments barely visible. Like dots in a puzzle only a sleepless imagination could connect. You picture its tail brushing through the llama's ear, its broken body sinking toward the fox's haunch. No wonder storytellers in every age linked comets with omens. How could you ignore a glowing smear slicing through the very animals you believed kept your world in order? Historians still argue whether Andean builders aligned their temples with these dark constellations, or whether those alignments are modern projections forced onto ruins. But as you lean against the stone, you realize the debate doesn't matter. What matters is the sensation that hum in your chest when you look up and see the sky breathing shapes back at you. That same hum is there tonight, as 3I divided by Atlas sketches its fleeting line across the dust lanes. A breeze rustles through dry grass. You laugh quietly at the thought. Maybe llamas in the field below are staring up at their celestial cousin, puzzled that humans ever needed ropes and quippers to track cycles, when the sky already gave them a nightly animal calendar. It's the ultimate Andean screensaver, free of charge. The Milky Way grows brighter as your eyes adjust. The shadows sharpen. The toad, the snake, the llama, they're all there. And the comet hovers like a bookmark in the story. You think about how cultures separated by oceans saw different things in the same sky. Europeans saw hunters and heroes. Andeans saw animals essential for survival. And now, here you are, seeing an alien snowball breaking apart, wondering if it's secretly drawing a cosmic map. Every generation scribbles its own layer on the heavens, and somehow they all fit. You yawn, the thin air making it feel like your chest is inflating with dust. But you don't want to close your eyes, because if you do, maybe the llama will vanish, the fox will scamper away, and 3I divided by Atlas will dissolve for good, leaving nothing but anonymous starlight, and that feels like losing a secret you were only just beginning to learn. So you stay awake a little longer, reading the shadows, tracing the streak, letting the animals and the alien visitor overlap into one restless, half-imagined cosmic map. Your gaze slides down from the dark llama and fox, away from the Milky Way, until your eyes settle on something entirely human: domes rising like pale bubbles on mountain tops. The Spanish never expected South America to become a hub of astronomy, but here you are, centuries after colonial times, watching how curiosity and empire reshape the night sky. The story drifts smoothly, because the sky doesn't pause for politics, it just keeps wheeling overhead. The mainstream fact: in the 17th century, Jesuit missionaries hauled astronomical instruments across the ocean to Lima and Cusco. They brought quadrants, astrolabes, and maps, determined to fix Easter dates and track eclipses. Later, in the colonial era, observatories sprouted in Buenos Aires and Santiago. By the 19th century, South America had become irresistible to global astronomers. Why? Because its southern skies revealed wonders Europe could barely glimpse: Magellanic Clouds, the Southern Cross, and swaths of the Milky Way hidden from northern eyes. Historians still argue whether these early observatories were genuine scientific projects or prestige trophies to impress Europe. Picture yourself wandering through an old observatory dome at night. The floor creaks, the brass fittings shine in faint moonlight. A massive telescope, all wood and metal, rests like a sleeping beast. Dust tickles your throat. You lean against a chilly railing, imagining the astronomers of 2 centuries ago, puffing cigars while waiting for clouds to move, scribbling numbers by lantern light. Now here's a quirky tidbit. Some colonial-era observatories were also social clubs. Politicians and wealthy patrons would gather for stargazing soirees. Imagine sipping wine while someone insists Saturn's rings look like a tiny hula hoop through the eyepiece. You laugh quietly, because even then, astronomy was half science, half performance art. And over all that history, comets passed. Records from the 1600s describe hairy stars seen from Lima, fiery omens of political upheaval. No one knew they were frozen interlopers until centuries later, but they mattered all the same. When 3I divided by Atlas appeared in 2019, it joined a lineage of strange visitors stretching back through every colonial journal and indigenous myth. Only now, instead of quadrants and ink, astronomers wield CCD cameras and supercomputers. The tools changed, the wonder stayed. You drift back outside the dome. The mountain air is sharp, the silence heavy. Behind you, the old instruments rest, and ahead of you, modern observatories glitter like jewels on higher peaks. Cerro Tololo, Las Campanas, Paranal. It feels like a relay race, Jesuits handing their sky-watching torch to French scientists, who passed it to Chilean and international teams, until finally the great glass eyes of today took over. You smirk, because if telescopes were people, this would be the longest tag "You're it" game in history. Historians still argue whether colonial scientists respected indigenous knowledge of the sky or dismissed it as superstition. Some journals suggest quiet borrowing, others suggest outright erasure. You shrug, because the truth is tangled, like threads in a tapestry frayed by centuries. Yet when you look up, the sky refuses to belong to anyone. The comet, the stars, the dark animals they don't recognize, borders or ownership, they just keep shining. As 3I divided by Atlas crawls across the heavens, you imagine how early observatory directors would have reacted. Would they have hailed it as proof of divine mystery, or would they have scrambled to measure its orbit, desperate to beat rivals back in Europe? Either way, the visitor would have stirred the same sleepless awe you feel now. You run your fingers along the cold stone of an observatory wall. The mortar smells faintly of dust and history. Your ears pick up a faint buzz, maybe a transformer, maybe just your imagination, but it makes you think of the continuity of instruments, from polished brass to humming electronics. You can't help joking with yourself. At least now, goats can't chew through fiber optic cables at these mountaintop fortresses. Progress, right? Above the domes, the sky swells wider, darker. The comet's fading tail brushes past the Southern Cross, as though signing the observatory logs with its own dissolving ink. You think of every astronomer who stood here before you. Colonial priests, immigrant scientists, graduate students yawning into thermoses. They all tilted their necks the same way. They all saw omens and equations in the same heavens, and so you stand with them, centuries compressed into one thin breath, watching a cosmic guess trace its line across South America's night. The stone walls of colonial domes dissolve, and now you're drifting down into the Atlantic, where something unseen tugs at compasses and satellites alike. You've probably never felt it, but you live with its shadow, the South Atlantic anomaly. It sprawls like an invisible bruise over South America and the Southern Atlantic Ocean, a magnetic scar in Earth's protective field. And as you tilt your head back toward 3I divided by Atlas, you wonder if that hidden cosmic map runs not just across deserts and skies, but also through this strange invisible wound. The mainstream fact: Earth's magnetic field is not perfectly centered or symmetrical. Its dipole core shifts, wobbles, and leaks. Right now, one of its weakest patches hovers over South America. In that zone, satellites flying overhead get pelted by extra radiation. Astronauts on the International Space Station sometimes see brief flashes of light in their eyes when passing through. Historians still argue whether this anomaly is a temporary wobble or the early warning of a geomagnetic reversal, when North and South poles could someday swap. You picture yourself floating above the anomaly in a satellite, laptop balanced on your knees, coffee floating in microgravity. Suddenly, your screen flickers, the data garbles, and you mutter something not PG-rated, all because you happen to cross this magnetic weak spot. Now imagine 3I divided by Atlas sliding silently across that same patch of sky. Coincidence? Or a reminder that maps aren't always lines in sand, they can be gaps in force fields too. The quirky tidbit: fishermen off Brazil sometimes tell stories of compasses going drunk at sea, spinning aimlessly as if the ocean itself were laughing at them. Sailors once blamed sea monsters or curses. Now we blame physics, but the vibe is the same. Something hidden messes with your sense of direction. You smirk, because if you ever wanted to hide a cosmic treasure, dropping it under a magnetic Bermuda Triangle would be genius. You sit back, close your eyes, and imagine ancient travelers without GPS, staring at the stars to find their way. If they sense their compasses wobble or their paths veer near this region, maybe they marked it in myth. A cursed sea, a holy zone, a place where gods fell to earth. Historians still argue whether myths of falling fire in Brazilian folklore connect to actual meteor showers, but tonight, you're willing to blur the line. Now, breathe. Feel your chest rise. The comet is still there, faint, its line overlapping the anomaly's invisible dome. You grin at the thought. Maybe the cosmic map is less about visible lines and more about distortions, about places where reality wrinkles. Kind of like how your bedsheet always folds in the worst way when you just want to lie down, only this wrinkle can scramble billion-dollar satellites. The air around you chills further, though you're only imagining it. You hear phantom beeps, echoes of failing electronics. In your mind's ear, it sounds like the comet is whispering, "Here is where the shield thins." And that whisper reminds you that Earth, for all its grandeur, is fragile. One thin layer of magnetism, one faint bubble of atmosphere, and you're naked in the cosmic wind. Your sarcastic side can't help chiming in. Sure, humans argue about politics endlessly, but do they realize their entire Wi-Fi connection owes its life to an invisible force field that occasionally hiccups over Brazil? Maybe that's the ultimate hidden map reminders from the universe to pay attention to the shields, not just the selfies. And still, you keep your eyes skyward. 3I divided by Atlas drifts across, unaware of Earth's struggles. Its fragments scatter, glowing briefly before fading into the dark. To the comet, Earth's anomaly is nothing. To you, it's a reminder that maps are not always drawn for comfort. Sometimes they highlight weaknesses, scars, soft spots. Sometimes the cosmic map points to the very places you'd rather not look. You sigh. The night hums faintly, as if even the air has been magnetized, and in that hum, you sense the next line of the hidden map forming, urging you onward through both myth and science. You rub your eyes, the chill still gnawing your fingertips, and suddenly the sky itself begins to shimmer. At first you think your vision's going fuzzy, but no, it's the air. Even when the night is black and still, the upper atmosphere glows faintly, an effect astronomers call air glow. It's like Earth is wearing a soft halo, too subtle for most eyes but captured easily by cameras. And somewhere within that glow, if you squint, you imagine three eye divided by Atlas sketching another faint line, as though using the planet's own canvas to extend its cosmic map. The mainstream fact: airglow happens when molecules in the atmosphere absorb sunlight during the day and then release that energy at night. To the naked eye, it's usually a faint green or red veil. Added to that, there's zodiacal light, a triangular glow caused by sunlight scattering off dust spread across the solar system's plane. Both effects can trick even seasoned stargazers, who sometimes mistake them for dawn arriving too early or for light pollution. Historians still argue whether ancient desert cultures in South America saw and recorded zodiacal light, mistaking it for a path to the gods. Now here's the quirky tidbit. Pilots flying overnight routes sometimes report seeing the horizon glow like a ghostly lamp, even when the moon is gone. Some even joke about it in logbooks, calling it the planet's nightlight. You chuckle softly, because of course Earth would need a comfort lamp, tucked in under cosmic blankets. You lie back against cold stone and let your imagination soak into that glow. Air molecules high above you are quietly releasing energy, invisible fireworks stretched thin. The zodiacal light, meanwhile, rises like a wedge, pointing along the same path the comet seems to trace. For a moment, you feel like you're inside a layered projection. Nazca lines on the ground, dark constellations in the Milky Way, airglow and dust scattering overhead, and the interstellar visitor sliding through them all. Each layer stacks like sheets on a projector, creating one vast hidden map. You smirk at your own thought. Maybe the universe is just the ultimate PowerPoint presentation, except the slides are galaxies, and the laser pointer is a comet fragment disintegrating at 30 kilometers per second. No wonder you can't sleep. The sky is so still you hear your own breath. You notice how your eyes play tricks. The greenish smear of three eye divided by Atlas's tail blends into the natural glow of the atmosphere, like two watercolor strokes bleeding together. You wonder how many comets in history went unnoticed, hidden within the haze, their trails mistaken for nothing but Earth's nightly halo. Historians still argue whether certain medieval aurora records were actually misidentified zodiacal light. The debate doesn't end, and maybe that's fitting. Some mysteries deserve to stay smudged. Your chest rises slowly, rhythm syncing with the hum of the night. You imagine the zodiacal light as a secret road, faint but reliable, connecting east and west horizons, and there, brushing across it, three eye divided by Atlas fades. The combination feels deliberate, like someone doodled over a sacred text. Or maybe it's just dust plus dust cometary debris on top of interplanetary debris, cosmic graffiti at its finest. The quirky voice in your head pipes up. If airglow is the Earth's nightlight, then three eye divided by Atlas crashing through it is like a moth smacking your lampshade. Annoying for you, profound for scientists. That's balance, right? And you can't ignore how soothing it is, this realization that even the night isn't truly dark. There's always a background glow, faint but persistent. The Earth itself refuses to be fully invisible, as though afraid of the dark. You grin. Apparently, even planets have bedtime anxieties. The comet's pieces trail like faint brushstrokes into the veil. You exhale, letting the whole scene soften. The hidden map doesn't feel rigid or geometric now. It feels like watercolor bleeding across paper, one layer into another, fragile but connected. And in that blur, in that gentle haze, you find yourself easing closer to sleep, lulled by light that isn't quite light, maps that aren't quite maps, but whispers all the same. You stretch out, the thin air buzzing faintly in your ears, and your mind shifts from glows and shadows to something sharper. Seeds. Not seeds you'd plant in soil, but seeds that drift between stars, wrapped in ice and dust. You stare at three eye divided by Atlas, faint and fractured, and wonder what if it wasn't just a visitor, What if it carried the building blocks of worlds, scattering them like a gardener who doesn't even know their own field? The mainstream fact: astronomers know that comets are icy reservoirs of carbon, oxygen, and other organics. In the early solar system, comets likely delivered water and organics to Earth, helping jumpstart life. Now consider that 3I divided by Atlas wasn't born here. It might have carried chemical recipes from another star system entirely. Historians still argue whether panspermia, the idea that life can spread between worlds by hitchhiking on comets, is realistic or just poetic speculation. Here's the quirky tidbit. In 2020, when scientists studied fragments of comet 67P divided by Churyumov-Gerasimenko, they discovered glycine, the simplest amino acid. Imagine a cosmic snowball carrying the same ingredient you'd find in your own muscles. Suddenly, your kitchen table and the void between stars don't feel so different. You chuckle, picturing an alien baker tossing comet dust into their bread dough. Extra fluffy, now with interstellar amino acids. The intending with 13 way. You tilt your head back, eyes following the path of 3I divided by Atlas. Each fragment crumbles, scattering microscopic shards into the solar wind. Where do they go? Maybe they'll spiral into Jupiter. Maybe they'll drift into interplanetary space. Forgotten. Or maybe, just maybe, a speck will someday land on a young rocky planet, orbiting a newborn star. You grin at the absurd thought. Somewhere in a system, light years away, alien microbes could eventually trace their ancestry back to a comet that once streaked over South America in your lifetime. The night air presses cold against your cheeks. You feel like you're listening to a secret conversation, comets whispering across epochs, trading recipes for chemistry. The comet doesn't care whether you're awake to notice. It just scatters seeds because that's what frozen vagabonds do. You realize the hidden cosmic map might not just be about geometry. It might be about fertility, an invisible network of seeds dropped across space, waiting for the right soil to sprout. Historians still argue whether ancient myths of sky stones bringing life or fire were distorted memories of comets. Some Andean legends speak of stars that shed milk upon the earth, nourishing the land. You lie there smirking, because the metaphor works: comet tails shedding icy particles like cosmic pollen. If that isn't ancient poetry describing cometary seeding, what is? You chuckle again at your own imagination. If comets are gardeners, then 3I divided by Atlas was the clumsy intern, dropping seeds everywhere while tripping over the Milky Way's rug. But clumsy gardeners still plant forests. The sky seems softer now. The greenish smear has thinned, but in its fading trail, you imagine countless invisible crumbs scattering outward. They'll never make headlines. They'll never get fancy catalogue numbers, but they're still out there, riding solar winds, carrying carbon chains across voids. A million-year delivery system, too slow for Amazon Prime, but effective enough to shape planets. You let your eyes close for a moment. The thought soothes you. The map isn't about guiding you to treasure. The map is the treasure. Every streak, every seed, every glow is a reminder that worlds, maybe even people, are stitched together from gifts tossed across light years. And tonight, you just happen to catch one of those gift givers mid-throw. Your breath fogs the thin air, and you picture yourself holding something simple, tactile, a length of knotted cord, each knot whispering a number or a story. The quipu, that ancient Andean tool, feels rough against your fingers, wool twisted, dyed, knotted in patterns that once served as memory and message. Historians still argue whether quipus carried only numerical data, tax records, census counts, or whether some were true texts, capable of encoding myths, journeys, maybe even maps of the sky. The mainstream fact: quipus were widely used by the Inca administration in the 15th and 16th centuries. Spanish chroniclers describe them as instruments of empire, the way clerks managed populations spread across mountains and deserts. Some modern researchers have identified a counting quipus with remarkable precision, the knots representing tens, hundreds, thousands. But others point to anomalous quipus with strange patterns that don't match known systems. What if those were the ones carrying ritual knowledge, celestial cycles, or pilgrim routes? Here's the quirky tidbit. One surviving quipu is rumored to contain a record of a solar eclipse. Imagine that an entire cosmic event tied up in wool and knots. You grin because you know the practical joke potential. Want to know when the world goes dark? Just untangle this ball of yarn for 40 hours. You tilt your head upward again, and the faint smear of 3I divided by Atlas feels almost like another quipu cord stretched across the night sky, each fragment glowing like a knot, a bead of memory tied to the string of orbit. You imagine ancient astronomer priests standing on terraces, knots dangling in their hands, comparing earthly chords with celestial trails. A cosmic correspondence, one knot here for a comet, another there for the solstice, a sequence woven into an invisible ledger. The Andean world didn't draw maps the way Europeans did. Instead of paper and ink, they tied cords and carved stones. Pilgrims followed CK lines radiating from Cusco, sacred paths linking shrines across the landscape. Some scholars suggest those CK lines mapped the sky as well, each shrine corresponding to a star or constellation. You imagine yourself walking one of those CK routes, knots of quipu tucked at your side, and overhead the comet mirrors your steps, trailing luminous beads across the void. Historians still argue whether Quipus could truly record narrative stories, or whether that dream belongs to modern wishful thinking. But you can't resist the idea. If one encoded the story of a fiery comet, would we ever know how to read it? The thought makes you chuckle. It's like finding a USB stick in a ruin, but the file format hasn't been invented yet. The air feels thinner, sharper, as if your imagination is running out of oxygen. You picture pilgrims trudging along desert roads centuries ago, Quipus bouncing on their belts, chanting to match the rhythm of their knots. And above them, perhaps, a comet streaking a bright intruder, knitting itself into their songs. Was it 3I divided by Atlas? No, impossible. But comets have always visited, and stories always found a way to tie them in. You smirk, because your modern mind can't help poking fun. If Quipus were the spreadsheets of the Andes, then comets were the Excel crashes, unexpected streaks that threw off the tidy columns. And maybe, just maybe, someone tied an extra knot, muttering about cosmic glitches. The comet fades a little further now, its line thinning, its fragments stretching out. You run your fingers along the imaginary quipu cord in your hand, tracing knots that no longer have interpreters. You realize the hidden map you're chasing tonight isn't just scratched into deserts or carved into domes. It may be tied into string, forgotten in storerooms, waiting for someone to decode. And overhead, the universe keeps adding knots of its own, each comet a temporary bead on the endless cord of the sky. The cords of the quipu unravel in your hands, and suddenly they twist into cables, antennas, dishes stretching wide across the desert floor. You've stumbled into the Atacama, the driest place on Earth, where silence is so complete you swear you can hear the stars humming. And here, humanity has planted eyes so vast they don't even look like eyes at all. ALMA, the Atacama Large Millimeter divided by Submillimeter Array, its 66 dishes listening for whispers from the coldest corners of the cosmos. The mainstream fact: ALMA is one of the most powerful radio observatories on Earth, perched at 5,000 meters on the Chajnantor Plateau. It peers into dust clouds where new stars are born, places ordinary telescopes can't penetrate. Alongside ALMA rise other giants, the Very Large Telescope, VLT, at Paranal, and the Extremely Large Telescope, ELT, now under construction, with a mirror nearly 40 meters across. Together, they make northern Chile the beating heart of modern astronomy. Historians still argue whether future generations will see this era as the golden age of ground-based observation, or as the last gasp before space telescopes dominate completely. You shuffle across the gravel, cold air biting your lungs. The dishes of ALMA tilt in eerie unison, like a flock of mechanical birds tracking prey. Tonight, they'd have swiveled to catch even the faintest fragment of 3I divided by Atlas, teasing apart its spectral fingerprint. You grin at the thought, giant machines eavesdropping on an interstellar snowball's final gasp. Here's the quirky tidbit. Because ALMA's site is so high, and oxygen so scarce, every worker gets issued their own oxygen tank in case of altitude sickness. You chuckle, picturing an astronomer gasping between data runs. I can decode a galaxy's birth cloud, but I can't climb a staircase without wheezing. You press your palm against one dish's cold metal, and it thrums faintly, like a bass note only your bones can feel. Through these machines, humanity translates radio waves into color images, spirals of galaxies, disks around young suns, plumes of molecules drifting across voids. And somewhere in those data streams, 3I divided by Atlas's chemistry was likely captured. Signatures of cyanide, carbon chains, dust grains older than Earth. The comet became another pixel in the giant radio map. The VLT on Paranal perches nearby, its four domes like watchful guardians. Each telescope can combine light through interferometry, mimicking the vision of a mirror the size of a football field. Imagine standing inside one of those domes, the shutter opening at dusk, the sky rushing in. A beam of starlight bounces through mirrors, bent, split, recombined, until your computer screen fills with data, and you mutter, coffee in hand. All this to watch a comet disintegrate like a snowball in a microwave. Historians still argue whether such vast facilities are monuments of knowledge or of ego. After all, each costs billions, while local villages sometimes lack running water. The tension is real, but here, in the silence of the Atacama, you feel the telescopes less as monuments and more as tools, fragile ears straining against cosmic static. The comet slides through your imagination again. You picture its tail refracted through ALMA's antennas, its light funneled into VLT spectrographs, its orbit extrapolated by software so precise it can predict the past. Each facility adds a layer to the hidden cosmic map: radio for molecules, infrared for dust, optical for light. The Atacama itself becomes a giant quipu, each telescope a knot in a cord stretching into the heavens. You laugh softly to yourself. So far tonight you've had desert lines, dark llamas, magnetic scars, glowing veils, knotted strings, and now radio dishes pretending to be cosmic ears. If someone stitched all these metaphors together, you'd have the weirdest patchwork quilt in the galaxy. Yet it works, because each is another way humans try to trace the untraceable. The night here is so silent your own pulse sounds loud. You tilt your head back and see 3I divided by Atlas fading further, but not gone. Its ghost now lives inside terabytes of ALMA recordings, inside mirrored vaults at Paranal, and soon inside ELT's future data pipelines. The comet is archived, pixelated, catalogued, but also still glowing faintly above you, proof that no matter how good your machines, you'll never quite pin down the sky. You exhale, slow and steady, feeling the Atacama's cold creep into your bones. Around you, the dishes rest like sleeping giants, and overhead, the hidden map keeps unfolding, line by glowing line. The desert silence is broken by a hum, not the dishes of ALMA this time, but the sun itself flexing its muscles. You glance upward, and though the night is clear, your imagination paints ripples of green and crimson across the horizon. These are auroras, rare in South America, but not impossible when the sun spits a tantrum. You lean into the thought, what happens to your hidden cosmic map when storms from the sun redraw the lines overnight? The mainstream fact: solar storms are bursts of charged particles hurled outward by coronal mass ejections. When they slam into Earth's magnetic field, they spark auroras near the poles, sometimes pushing down into lower latitudes. In March 1989, one such storm knocked out Quebec's power grid entirely. Historians still argue whether ancient records of red skies in China or Rome were auroras from megastorms, or whether scribes exaggerated for dramatic effect. Here's the quirky tidbit. In 1859, during the Carrington event, auroras were so bright in the Caribbean that roosters crowed at midnight. Imagine stumbling out of bed, confused chickens yelling at the sky, and telegraph machines sparking like haunted typewriters. You chuckle because you can't help picturing a poor 19th century telegraph operator muttering, "I didn't sign up for ghost Morse code." Now, here in South America, the auroras don't usually reach you, but during strong storms, faint curtains sometimes ripple across Argentina, even brushing southern Brazil. You imagine yourself standing on a hillside, wind cold in your ears, as faint ribbons flicker above. And then you notice 3I divided by Atlas slicing right through them, comet dust glowing against solar fire. Two alien forces overlapping, one from inside our star, the other from outside our galaxy. The map suddenly looks alive, shifting, rewriting itself in real time. You smile, half in awe, half in sarcasm. Humans argue about deadlines, but the sun doesn't care. It hurls plasma storms across 150 million kilometers just to remind you who really runs the power grid. The comet, though, it just shrugs if snowballs had shoulders and keeps tumbling. As you picture the auroras dancing, you also imagine satellites above you trembling. The South Atlantic anomaly weakens the shield here. Solar storms make it worse. Power grids jitter, airplane routes shift, and scientists huddle around monitors, hoping the data streams don't fry. You can almost hear someone in a control room mutter, "Well, there goes another billion-dollar satellite. Guess we'll blame the sun again." Historians still argue whether ancient South Americans noticed faint auroras. Some chronicles from Spanish colonists mention red veils in the sky, terrifying locals who thought the heavens were bleeding. Were they real auroras, or just desert dust glowing? The line blurs, like every other story you've wandered through tonight. The comet fades a little more, tail shredded by sunlight, but your imagination keeps it vivid. A faint arrow gliding straight through auroral curtains, tracing a path as though marking an X on a cosmic treasure map. You let yourself grin because if you ever wanted a sign from the universe, glowing ribbons plus alien comet is about as unsubtle as it gets. You exhale slowly, the night air cool in your lungs. Around you, the hills stay dark, but above, the map continues to redraw itself. Green veils, red ribbons, comet streaks. You realize the hidden map isn't static at all. It's dynamic, alive, forever rewritten by solar storms and alien wanderers. Maybe that's the point. The map isn't something you can memorize. It's something you have to keep watching, night after night, century after century, until the patterns reveal themselves. And so you lean back, letting your eyes close for just a moment, the imagined auroras still flickering across your eyelids. Somewhere beyond them, 3I divided by Atlas keeps drifting, patient, fragile, unconcerned with whether anyone understands its path. Your eyelids flutter, but the hum of the sun lingers in your ears, and then it shifts thinner, steadier, like static pouring from an old radio. You realize you're now listening to a different kind of map, one stitched not from light or dust, but from sound. Radio cartographers, that's what they are, scientists who sketch the cosmos with wavelengths invisible to your eyes. You grin faintly at the thought. The universe is basically a giant broadcast, and you're just lucky enough to be tuned in tonight. The mainstream fact: radio astronomy revealed the Milky Way's structure. In the mid-20th century, astronomers used hydrogen's 21-centimeter line to map the galaxy's spiral arms. Pulsars, too, those spinning neutron stars, discovered in 1967, became cosmic lighthouses, their regular blips so precise you could set your watch by them. By stitching those pulses and hydrogen maps together, scientists built the most detailed star chart humanity had ever known. Historians still argue whether these discoveries marked the true beginning of big science in astronomy, when massive instruments and international teams became the norm. Now, here's the quirky tidbit. When Jocelyn Bell Burnell first detected pulsars, she jokingly labeled the signal LGM1, short for Little Green Men. Imagine the disappointment of realizing your alien message was just a highly magnetized star spinning absurdly fast. Still, you chuckle, because the name stuck long enough to make its way into footnotes and coffee mugs. Tonight, in your drifting imagination, you see those pulsar beacons as dots on a galactic grid. Each one pulses, tick tick tick, like knots on a cosmic quipu. And then, sliding through the chart, comes 3I divided by Atlas, adding its own streak. It doesn't pulse, it doesn't repeat, but it leaves a mark, a wandering slash across a carefully drawn radio diagram. The map is no longer static. It's scribbled on by a visitor who doesn't follow the rules. You picture yourself in a control room, headphones over your ears, static hissing. Suddenly, a faint crackle emerges, the comet's fragments reflecting radio waves. You can almost convince yourself it's speaking. You laugh softly, because of course your sleep-deprived brain would try to find words in noise. Humans love patterns too much to resist. Historians still argue whether radio cartography counts as seeing or listening. Does a hydrogen map represent the galaxy itself, or just one translation of it? But lying here, the question feels moot. Whether by eye, by not, or by static, every map is a way of saying, we're trying to make sense of where we are. You let the thought wander further. Pulsar signals have even been carved into plaques and spacecraft messages intended for aliens. Voyager's golden record carries their patterns like coordinates, saying, here's how to find us. You grin. We literally published our home address in Pulsar ink and then tossed it into interstellar space. If that isn't trusting the wrong cosmic delivery service, what is? And what if 3I divided by Atlas carried its own message, hidden in dust spectra or fragmentation rhythms? You imagine alien astronomers somewhere else, tuning their dishes, catching a faint signature, muttering about a strange snowball from another system. The thought makes you feel both small and hilariously important at the same time. The sky above is quiet again. the comet's trail dim but still threading through your vision. Yet now, you don't just see it, you hear it. A faint static note in the grand radio symphony of the galaxy. The hidden map becomes audible, a layered hum stitched from hydrogen, pulsars, auroras, and alien comets. And you lie there, smiling, half convinced that if you just relax enough you'll decode the song. The hiss of static fades, and your gaze turns back to the river of stars. You follow 3I divided by Atlas as it drifts toward the dense backdrop of Sagittarius, that crowded region of the sky pointing straight toward the center of the Milky Way. It's almost unfair. While other constellations are sparse, Sagittarius looks stuffed, as if the galaxy spilled its jewelry box in one place. And through that glittering clutter, the comet carves its fading path. The mainstream fact: the galactic center lies in this direction, hidden behind thick clouds of dust. Radio and infrared telescopes reveal what your eyes can't. A supermassive black hole, Sagittarius A*, weighing about 4 million suns. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures who mythologize Sagittarius sensed something unusual about this patch of sky, or whether they just picked it because it was bright and busy. You let yourself imagine ancient storytellers seeing a teapot in Sagittarius, the shape Western stargazers still use, and laughing that the universe itself was brewing tea. And now, across that steaming pot, a comet streaks, fragile and doomed. You grin at the cheeky thought, maybe 3I divided by Atlas was just passing through to borrow a cosmic kettle. Here's the quirky tidbit. When astronomers finally imaged Sagittarius A times in 2022, using the Event Horizon telescope, they admitted it looked like a fuzzy donut. Billions spent, decades of effort, and the galaxy's heart turned out to resemble breakfast. You chuckle softly, because it proves science is just as prone to anticlimax as life. But you don't laugh long, because Sagittarius is more than a donut. It's a graveyard and a nursery. Stars collapsing and stars forming, energy boiling in radio jets. You picture yourself floating there, the black hole's gravity tugging, and then faintly you see the comet's trail brush across that chaos. Not literally, of course, it's just a line of sight, but your imagination doesn't care. To you, the visitor from another star is signing its name across the Milky Way's central page. Historians still argue whether early cultures saw Sagittarius as an archer, a centaur, or some hybrid mix. But tonight you see it as a gate, a doorway into the galaxy's depths, and 3I divided by Atlas feels like a traveler who slipped through, leaving only chalk marks on the doorframe. You breathe in deeply. The air is so thin up here that each inhale feels like sipping through a straw, but that only makes the stars sharper, like cut glass scattered across velvet. You remember that this comet traveled for millions of years, maybe billions, from some other stellar nursery far away, and now it passes in front of Sagittarius, the Milky Way's own nursery, before breaking apart. One nursery meets another, linked for just a blink in cosmic time. The sarcastic side of you mutters, "Great, so you stayed awake at 3A, just to watch a snowball explode in front of a giant space donut. Worth it?" And yet, when you tilt your head back, you know it is worth it. Because in that absurd juxtaposition, breakfast pastry plus cosmic death trap, you glimpse how wildly diverse the universe can be. The comet's tail smears faintly across the stars. You imagine each fragment as a breadcrumb, leading through the clutter of Sagittarius, deeper toward the hidden heart. You'll never follow it there, not really. But the thought is enough that somewhere in this messy cosmic kitchen, a trail is laid, and tonight you're allowed to trace it with your eyes. Your lungs ache a little from the thin air, but you stay fixed on the sky, tracing the last faint trail of 3I divided by Atlas, as if it were a signature scrawled across everything you've seen tonight. The Nazca Plateau, the dark llama, the colonial domes, the magnetic bruise, the shimmering airglow, the seeds, the quipus, the radio maps, the auroras, and now Sagittarius. They all feel like chapters of one riddle, and you realize it's time to try decoding it. The mainstream fact: astronomers don't deny that humans seek patterns. In fact, they build whole careers on pattern recognition. The very act of astronomy is mapping: constellations, catalogues, orbital charts. Yet maps don't just describe, they shape what you think is real. Historians still argue whether old sky maps created culture or merely reflected it. Was Orion a hunter because people saw one? Or did the myth force future eyes to connect those stars in that way forever? Here's the quirky tidbit. When Galileo first pointed his telescope at the stars, he was stunned by how the Milky Way was not a cloud but countless stars packed together. He scribbled drawings in his notebook, messy, hurried, full of crossouts. Even geniuses make doodles when faced with overwhelming data. You chuckle, because maybe the hidden cosmic map is less about elegant geometry and more about doodles scribbled across epochs. So you begin decoding. Start with the ground, Nazca lines, Secche routes, geoglyphs. Add the sky, dark constellations, colonial charts, radio signals. Layer the anomalies, air glow, auroras, magnetic scars. Finally, place the comet's line across them all. Step back in your mind's eye, and what do you see? Not a single treasure map with an X, but a web threads binding past and present, earth and sky, myth and science. You smirk, because your sarcastic side pipes up. Congratulations, you stayed up all night to realize the map looks like tangled earbuds. But then you breathe and realize tangled earbuds still carry music. A messy map can still guide you, if only to the next question. Historians still argue whether 3I divided by Atlas should even count as a real interstellar comet, since its breakup made precise measurements difficult. Was it truly alien, or just an unusually fast local? You laugh, because even here, the scholars are basically debating whether the cosmic tourist stamped its passport or just skipped the line. Either way, its path forced you to connect dots across cultures and centuries. That's mapping enough. The air is colder now. You rub your arms, feeling the thin fabric failing against the mountain chill. But your mind is warm, almost glowing, from tracing lines that no one else may have bothered to connect. The hidden map is not about certainty. It's about wonder stitched through fragments. Comet dust, desert geoglyphs, knots in string, faint auroras, all equally fragile, all equally meaningful. You tilt your head, and for just a second, you imagine the map aligning. The llama points to the Nazca hummingbird, the quipu knots to Alma's dishes, the aurora curtains to the South Atlantic anomaly, and the comet's tail slices right across the middle, binding it all like a cosmic seam. You whisper under your breath, half joking, half awed, "Okay, universe, I see what you did there." Entselft is risations. The thought softens you, like a lullaby settling in. You realize decoding the map was never about solving it. It was about seeing it, letting yourself wander from shadow animals to giant telescopes, from knots to donuts, from sarcasm to silence, until the fragments formed a picture only you could hold. And maybe that's enough. The night has stretched long, your body heavy with fatigue, but your eyes still cling to that faint green smear, what remains of 3I divided by Atlas. Its parabola through the solar system is nearly finished. No return orbit, no looping dance like Halley's comet, just one long farewell curve, vanishing into the dark between stars. You sigh softly, because you know you're watching the last page of this story turn itself. The mainstream fact: hyperbolic comets like 3I divided by Atlas don't come back. They arrive, they pass, they leave forever. Gravity doesn't bind them, it merely bends their paths for a moment. By the time Atlas was spotted in 2019, its fate was already sealed. Its nucleus fractured, its brightness peaked, and then it faded. Historians still argue whether it originated in the Oort cloud of another star, or whether it was just a shard of some long-forgotten system flung out millions of years ago. Here's the quirky tidbit. When 3I divided by Atlas broke apart, amateur astronomers joked it was the comet that ghosted Earth. We prepared telescopes, scheduled campaigns, and then poof, it crumbled before the big show. You grin faintly, because cosmic disappointment is universal. Even the heavens know how to leave you hanging. Still, there's something poetic about that parabola. You trace it in your mind, a curve bending around the sun, then stretching back outward, into the void. It looks less like an ending and more like a brushstroke, one line in the hidden map you've been following all night. The Nazca lines etched below, the dark constellations overhead, the magnetic scars, the auroras, the knots of Quipus, the giant dishes, all connected by this arc. You close your eyes for a moment, and the whole journey replays. Deserts whispering shapes, animals breathing in dust lanes, colonial domes creaking, satellites flickering in weak magnetic fields, auroras shivering across unlikely skies, and threading through them all, the comet's path. Not a tourist, not a ghost, but a stitch pulling Earth into the wider quilt of the galaxy. Historians still argue whether comets are omens or just ice. Scientists argue whether interstellar visitors matter more for chemistry or for curiosity. But here, lying under thin air and cold stars, the debate dissolves. The truth is simpler. Comets remind you that you're part of a story much larger than yourself, written across millions of years and light years. You let your sarcasm whisper one last time. So, you stayed up to watch a cosmic snowball disintegrate. Congratulations. But even that voice softens. Because really, you stayed up to feel the map, the possibility that sky and earth, science and myth, all scribble together. And that feeling is enough to lull you into calm. The smear of 3I divided by Atlas grows thinner, fainter. You exhale, your breath fogging into the night. And then, as though it were never here, the comet is gone, slipped past the edges of your vision, folded into the dark. You whisper a quiet goodnight, not because it can hear you, but because you can. Now the hidden map lies folded inside you, fragile but glowing, a memory to take into dreams. Your body sinks deeper into stillness now, as though the mountain itself is cradling you. The cold no longer bites. Instead, it feels like a blanket of quiet laid across your shoulders. Overhead, the sky remains vast, but softer, the stars blurring into a gentle haze. The comet is gone, but its trail lingers in your memory, like the faint glow of a candle after it's been blown out. You breathe slower, each inhale deeper, each exhale longer. The rhythm steadies you, reminding you that for all the chaos of solar storms, anomalies, and wandering comets, here you are, safe, warm enough, alive. The universe hums with mysteries, but none of them demand answers right now. They only ask that you rest. Picture the map you've been tracing tonight. Fold it gently, like a piece of paper worn at the edges. Slide it into your pocket. It doesn't matter if it leads anywhere. What matters is that it's yours, and that every knot, every glow, every scribble will wait for you when you open it again. The night is quiet. The desert is still. The fan in your room hums softly, blending with the silence you've been imagining on mountaintops and in radio observatories. Let that sound carry you now, like a lullaby you don't need to remember the words to. Your eyes grow heavy. The stars fade behind your eyelids. The map softens, unravels, and becomes simply darkness, calm, endless, gentle. And so the comet leaves, and so you sleep.